The phone call came at 2:47 in the afternoon, right as I was shoving the last of my clothes into a garbage bag because apparently I didn't even deserve suitcases anymore. My hands were shaking so badly, I almost dropped my cell phone onto the hardwood floor of what used to be my bedroom. The bedroom I painted sage green 3 years ago when Marcus and I first moved into this house. The bedroom where I'd hung curtains I'd sewn myself because we couldn't afford the ones from Pottery Barn. The bedroom I was now being ordered to vacate by my own husband because his mother, the illustrious Patricia Henley, had decided she wanted my place in this home and in this family. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Claire Donovan, though I suppose I should say Claire Henley now, even if that name was apparently becoming as temporary as my residence in this house. At 31 years old, I thought I had my life figured out. I was a middle school art teacher, made decent money, loved my job, and had married a man I believed loved me back. Marcus Henley had been my college sweetheart, the kind of guy who brought me coffee during late-night study sessions and remembered the names of all my students when I talked about them over dinner. We'd been married for 6 years, together for 10, and I genuinely believed we were building something lasting. Then Patricia happened. Or rather, Patricia's money happened. Marcus's mother had never approved of me. From the moment we met at a stiff family dinner 7 years ago, she'd made it abundantly clear that her son, her precious only child, deserved someone from a better family with better connections and a better pedigree. My father was a mechanic. My mother worked as a cashier at Target. I put myself through college on scholarships and student loans that I was still paying off. In Patricia's world, that made me fundamentally unsuitable, no matter how much Marcus claimed to love me. 4 years, she'd lived 3 states away in Connecticut, which made her disapproval easier to handle. Sure, she'd make cutting remarks during holiday visits about my thrift store furniture, or my practical Honda Civic instead of something more prestigious. She'd compare me unfavorably to Marcus's ex-girlfriend from prep school, who'd apparently married a surgeon and lived in a sprawling home in the Hamptons. But the distance created a buffer. Marcus would tell me to ignore her, that he'd chosen me and that was what mattered, and I'd believed him. Then Patricia's husband, Richard, passed away 8 months ago. Suddenly, she was alone in that enormous Connecticut estate with more money than she knew what to do with and a burning desire to be closer to her only son. Marcus started making weekend trips to help her sort through his father's affairs. Those weekends became longer. His phone calls with her became daily, sometimes lasting hours. And slowly, insidiously, I began to notice changes. It started small. Marcus questioning my spending even though I'd always been the more frugal one. Comments about how his mother had mentioned I could dress more professionally, never mind that I taught 12-year-olds who got paint on everything. Suggestions that maybe we should upgrade the house, get something bigger, more impressive, something his mother would feel comfortable visiting for extended stays. When I pointed out we were still paying off my student loans and saving for the down payment we'd already made on this house, his face would darken with an irritation I'd never seen before. The real shift happened 3 months ago when Patricia announced she was selling the Connecticut estate and moving to our city. She'd found a beautiful penthouse downtown, she said, but it wouldn't be ready for another 6 months due to renovations. She needed somewhere to stay in the interim, somewhere close to family, somewhere with her son. I should have seen it coming. I really should have. But even in my worst imaginings, I hadn't predicted this. 2 weeks ago, Marcus sat me down at our kitchen table, the one we'd refinished together during a long weekend project where we'd laughed and gotten splinters and made love on the floor because we couldn't wait to christen our handiwork. He'd looked uncomfortable, wouldn't quite meet my eyes, and told me his mother needed to move in with us. Not just visit. Move in. Indefinitely. I tried to be reasonable. I suggested she could take the guest room. We'd make it work. It was only 6 months after all. But Marcus shook his head. His mother was going through a difficult time grieving, adjusting to widowhood. She needed her own space. Privacy. Comfort. She needed the master bedroom. Our master bedroom. The argument that followed was the worst fight of our marriage. I'd shouted things I didn't mean and meant things I couldn't shout loudly enough. Where was I supposed to sleep? The guest room, Marcus said, as if that was perfectly reasonable. As if asking me to give up my own bedroom in my own house to his mother was a totally normal and acceptable thing. When I refused, when I said absolutely not, this is our home, he delivered the final blow with frightening calm. Then maybe you should find somewhere else to stay. Just temporarily. Until Mom gets settled. Until things calm down. Just for a little while, Claire. I'd stared at him like he'd grown a second head. He was kicking me out. His wife. So his mother could have our house to herself. When I said this out loud, he'd gotten defensive, claiming I was being dramatic, that I was making this harder than it needed to be. That if I really loved him, I'd understand what a difficult position he was in. That's when I knew I'd already lost him. Or maybe I'd never really had him at all. Maybe Patricia had always held the stronger claim, and I'd just been too naive to see it. So here I was, packing my life into trash bags like some kind of criminal being evicted, while Marcus was conveniently out of the house, probably avoiding the messy reality of what he was doing. Patricia was due to arrive tomorrow with her designer luggage and her contempt. I had nowhere to go except my best friend Amy's couch, which she'd offered immediately when I'd called her sobbing last night. The phone was still ringing in my hand. I looked at the screen through blurry eyes. Unknown number. Probably a spam call about my car's extended warranty. I almost didn't answer. But something made me swipe to accept. Maybe just the desperate hope for any distraction from the nightmare my life had become. Hello, I managed, my voice rough from crying. Is this Claire Henley? The voice was male, professional, with a slight edge that immediately put me on alert. Yes, this is Claire. Mrs. Henley, this is James Morrison from First National Bank. I'm calling regarding the mortgage on your property at 847 Riverside Drive. There's been some unusual activity on the account that requires your immediate attention. I sank onto the edge of the bed, still unmade from this morning when I'd woken up still stupidly hoping Marcus would change his mind. Unusual activity? What kind of unusual activity? There was a pause, the sound of papers shuffling. Mrs. Henley, are you aware that your husband initiated a refinance application on the property last week? My stomach dropped. No, I'm not aware of that. We didn't discuss any refinancing. I see. Morrison's voice became more careful. Mrs. Henley, as a co-owner of the property and co-signer on the original mortgage, any refinancing would require your signature and consent. However, your husband submitted an application claiming you'd agreed to the terms. When our underwriting department processed the application, they noticed some discrepancies in the documentation. What kind of discrepancies? My voice came out barely above a whisper. The signature on the consent form doesn't match the signature we have on file from your original mortgage documents. It appears someone may have forged your signature, Mrs. Henley. That's mortgage fraud, a federal crime. We're required to report this to the authorities, but I wanted to contact you first to verify whether you'd actually consented to this refinance. The room spun. I gripped the phone so hard my knuckles turned white. No, I never signed anything. I didn't even know about this. Why would Marcus refinance without telling me? But even as I asked the question, pieces were clicking into place in my mind. The way Marcus had been so eager to push me out of the house. Patricia's sudden urgent need for our master bedroom. The refinancing application. What were the terms of the refinance? I asked, my teacher's brain kicking in, the part of me that helped 13-year-olds work through complex problems by breaking them down into smaller, manageable pieces. More shuffling of papers. The application was for a cash-out refinance in the amount of $375,000. The property was originally purchased for $400,000, and you've paid it down to approximately $250,000. The new loan would be for $625,000, releasing the equity as cash. $375,000. Fortune. Enough to pay off my student loans 100 times over. Enough for Patricia to completely renovate her penthouse. Enough for Marcus to do whatever his mother wanted him to do. Mrs. Henley? Are you still there? I'm here. I force myself to focus. Mr. Morrison, what happens now? Well, first, I need to confirm that you did not authorize this refinance, and that the signature on the consent form is not yours. If that's the case, we'll need you to come into the office to file a formal complaint. We'll halt the refinance process immediately, and we'll have to report the attempted fraud to the appropriate authorities. Your husband could face serious legal consequences. He's not just my husband. The words came out flat, emotionless. He's trying to steal my house. Our house. The house I helped buy. The house where I've lived for 3 years. And I'm betting he planned to take that money and I'd never see a dime of it. I would advise you to contact an attorney immediately, Mrs. Henley. This is a serious situation. Can you come to the bank today? We're open until 6. I looked at my watch. It was just after 3. I'll be there within the hour. After hanging up, I sat motionless on the bed, my mind racing. Marcus had tried to commit mortgage fraud. He'd forged my signature to steal nearly $400,000 from our jointly owned home. He'd been willing to kick me out, humiliate me, end our marriage, also he and his mother could get their hands on money that was legally half mine. The betrayal was so enormous I almost couldn't process it. This wasn't just about choosing his mother over his wife. This was criminal. This was calculated. This meant that every word of love, every promise, every moment of our marriage had been built on sand.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
Ready to wash away the moment Patricia decided she wanted something different for her son. My phone buzzed with a text. Marcus. The audacity. Mom's flight lands at 9 tomorrow morning. Please be out by then. I'll leave your key on the kitchen counter. Something crystallized inside me then. Something cold and hard and utterly clear. I'd spent the last 2 weeks crying, pleading, trying to make Marcus see reason, trying to save a marriage that was already dead. I'd been so focused on the emotional devastation that I hadn't stopped to think strategically. But I was done being the victim in this story. Done being the inconvenient wife who was supposed to quietly disappear. I stood up, left the garbage bags where they lay and grabbed my purse. The bank was 15 minutes away in light traffic. I had documentation to provide, statements to make, and an attorney to call. And after that, I had a very interesting conversation to have with my soon-to-be ex-husband about what happened to men who committed federal crimes to please their mothers. Amy answered on the second ring. Her voice was thick with sympathy. Claire, honey, are you okay? Do you need me to come help you pack? Change of plans. My voice was steady now, energized by purpose. I need the name of the best divorce attorney you know. Preferably one who's handled cases involving fraud. There was a beat of surprised silence. Oh my God. What happened? Marcus tried to refinance the house without my knowledge and forged my signature. The bank just called. It's mortgage fraud, Amy. He's not just kicking me out. He was trying to steal everything. Amy's response was a string of profanity creative enough to make my middle schoolers proud. That absolute piece of garbage. Okay, yes, I know exactly who you need. My cousin Rachel went through something similar with her ex. The lawyer she used was phenomenal. Absolutely destroyed him in court. Let me text you her number right now. Thank you. I grabbed my car keys. I'm heading to the bank now. I'll call the attorney from there. Claire. Amy's voice softened. I'm proud of you. Go get him. The bank was an older building downtown, all marble and brass, the kind of place that took mortgages and financial crimes very seriously. James Morrison turned out to be a man in his 50s with steel gray hair, and the no-nonsense demeanor of someone who'd seen every kind of financial shenanigan imaginable. He led me to a private office and closed the door. Mrs. Henley, thank you for coming in so quickly. I know this must be incredibly difficult. He laid out the paperwork in front of me. The refinance application with Marcus's signature, bold and familiar. And then the consent form with my signature, except it wasn't my signature. It was close, but the loops were wrong, the pressure different. Anyone comparing it to my actual signature could see the difference. This isn't my signature. I pointed to the forgery. I never signed this document. I never consented to any refinance. In fact, I didn't even know my husband was trying to do this until you called me an hour ago. Morrison nodded, making notes. And you're certain your husband knew you hadn't consented? There's no possibility this was a misunderstanding? I'm currently being kicked out of my own house to make room for his mother. I'm packing my things into trash bags as we speak because apparently I don't even deserve the dignity of suitcases. No, Mr. Morrison, this wasn't a misunderstanding. This was calculated. He studied me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Mrs. Henley, I'm going to be frank with you. In my 23 years in banking, I've seen a lot of attempted fraud. Usually it's clumsy, easily caught. This was more sophisticated. The signature was good enough that if our underwriting department hadn't been particularly thorough, It might have slipped through. That suggests your husband either practiced forging your signature or had help from someone with experience. Patricia. The name came out bitter. His mother. She has money connections. She's the one pushing for all of this. Morrison made another note. Do you have any evidence of her involvement? I thought about it. The texts Marcus had sent me about his mother's needs. The conversations we'd had where he'd mentioned her suggestions. It was all circumstantial, but it painted a picture. I have text messages, emails, evidence that his mother has been increasingly controlling his decisions, particularly financial ones. Evidence that this refinance application coincided with her announced plans to move in with us. That could be helpful. Morrison pulled out a formal complaint form. I need you to fill this out, stating that you did not authorize the refinance and that the signature is not yours. Once we have this on file, we'll halt the refinance process and report the attempted fraud to the FBI. Mortgage fraud is a federal crime, Mrs. Henley. Your husband is looking at potential prison time. The weight of that hit me. Prison. Marcus could go to prison. The man I'd loved, the man I'd planned a future with, could end up in a federal penitentiary because he'd chosen his mother's greed over his wife's trust. But even as I felt a flicker of something that might have been pity, I remembered the text message. Please be out by then. I'll leave your key on the kitchen counter. He'd already decided I was disposable. He'd already chosen his path. I picked up the pen and started filling out the form. An hour later, I was sitting in the office of Rebecca Steinberg, the divorce attorney Amy's cousin had recommended. Rebecca was a woman in her early 40s with sharp eyes and an even sharper suit. She'd listened to my entire story without interruption, taking occasional notes, her expression growing more focused as I detailed Marcus's actions. When I finished, she sat back in her chair and steepled her fingers. Claire, you have a very strong case. Extremely strong. Your husband has committed a federal crime, attempted to defraud you of your share of marital assets, and has constructively evicted you from your marital home. Any halfway competent judge will see through this immediately. What are my options? First, we file for divorce immediately on the grounds of fraud and abandonment. Second, we file for an emergency restraining order preventing Marcus from taking any action regarding the house, including having his mother move in. Third, we file a motion for exclusive possession of the marital home, which means you move back in and he moves out. And fourth, we make it very clear that you're cooperating fully with the federal investigation into the mortgage fraud. Rebecca leaned forward. I'm going to be honest with you, Claire. This is going to get ugly. Your husband and his mother aren't going to take this lying down. They have money, and money can draw out legal proceedings. But the thing is, they've made catastrophic mistakes. The mortgage fraud alone is enough to give us enormous leverage. Most divorce cases are he said, she said situations with messy gray areas. This is black and white. He committed a crime. He tried to steal from you. That's our foundation. How long will this take? Divorce in this state typically takes 6 months to a year. But with the fraud angle and the emergency motions, we can have you back in your house within a week. Maybe sooner. A week. I could be back home in a week. The home Marcus was trying to steal. The home Patricia thought she could just take over like some kind of colonial conqueror. Let's do it. All of it. File everything. Rebecca smiled, and it wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of a lawyer who enjoyed destroying people who deserved it. You've got it. I'll have the paperwork ready by end of business today. We'll file first thing tomorrow morning. Do you have somewhere safe to stay tonight? My friend Amy's place. Good. Stay there. Don't go back to the house until we have the restraining order in place. Don't answer calls from Marcus unless I'm present or it's on speakerphone where you can record it. In fact, I want you to start documenting everything. Every text, every call, every interaction. Save it all. I nodded, feeling more in control than I had in weeks. What about Patricia? Can we do anything about her involvement? If we can prove she knew about or participated in the fraud, she could be charged as an accessory. At minimum, we can depose her in the divorce proceedings. She'll have to testify under oath about her knowledge of the financial situation and her role in pushing Marcus to kick you out. The thought of Patricia, imperious and judgmental Patricia, having to sit in a deposition and answer uncomfortable questions under oath gave me a surge of satisfaction that probably wasn't very mature but felt absolutely justified. I left Rebecca's office with a thick folder of paperwork and a strange sense of calm. My marriage was over. My husband had betrayed me in the most fundamental way possible. But I wasn't homeless. I wasn't helpless. And I absolutely wasn't going to be the disposable woman Marcus and Patricia had assumed I was. Amy was waiting at her apartment when I arrived. A bottle of wine already open and Chinese takeout on the coffee table. She took one look at my face and pulled me into a hug. Tell me everything. I did. I told her about the bank, about the fraud, about Rebecca and the emergency motions. Amy listened with growing outrage, her face cycling through shock, fury, and fierce pride. You're going to destroy them, she said when I finished. Claire, they have no idea what they've done. They thought you'd just quietly disappear. Instead, they've handed you every single weapon. You need to obliterate them. Marcus tried calling 3 times that evening. I ignored all of them. He sent a series of increasingly agitated texts. Where are you? We need to talk. Claire, this is childish. Call me back. My lawyer says you went to the bank. What did you tell them? You're making a huge mistake. Just call me so we can work this out. I showed the text to Amy, who laughed so hard she nearly choked on her low mane. He thinks he can still control the narrative. He still thinks you're going to be reasonable and accommodating. Oh, Claire, tomorrow is going to be spectacular. The next morning, I woke up on Amy's couch to a text from Rebecca. Papers filed. Process server is heading to your house now. Should reach Marcus within the hour. Restraining order hearing is scheduled for this afternoon at 2. Wear something professional but sympathetic. The process server would be showing up right around the time Patricia's flight was supposed to land. The timing was poetic. I dressed in a navy blue dress, professional and modest, the kind of thing I wore to parent-teacher conferences when I needed to look authoritative. Amy drove me to the courthouse, insisting on coming along for moral support. Rebecca met us outside the courtroom, looking confident and sharp in a charcoal gray suit. Their lawyer just arrived, she murmured. Gerald Hutchins. He's competent but not creative. This should go our way. The hearing was in front of Judge Andrea Walsh, a woman in her 60s with a reputation for not tolerating nonsense. Marcus was already seated with his attorney when I walked in. He looked haggard, like he hadn't slept. Good. His eyes widened when he saw me with Rebecca. We hadn't seen each other face to face since the day he told me to move out. I kept my expression neutral, distant, looking at him like he was a stranger. In many ways he was. The hearing proceeded quickly. Rebecca laid out the facts with devastating clarity. The mortgage fraud attempt. The forged signature. The bank's official complaint. The FBI investigation that had been opened that morning. Marcus's attempt to force me from our marital home to make room for his mother. His refusal to allow me access to my own property. Judge Walsh listened with an increasingly stern expression. She asked Marcus's attorney if he disputed any of the facts. He couldn't. The evidence was too clear. Mr. Henley, the judge said, looking at Marcus with unconcealed distaste. You attempted to commit mortgage fraud against your own wife. You forged her signature on legal documents. You constructively evicted her from her home. Do you understand that you're currently under federal investigation for these actions? Marcus's face had gone gray. Your Honor, I can explain. My mother needed. Judge Walsh held up a hand. I don't want to hear about your mother, Mr. Henley. Your mother is not party to this marriage or this mortgage. What I see here is a clear pattern of financial abuse and criminal behavior. She turned to Rebecca. Counselor, what are you requesting? Exclusive possession of the marital home for my client, effective immediately. A restraining order preventing Mr. Henley from entering the property or disposing of any marital assets. And an order requiring Mr. Henley to pay temporary spousal support in the amount of $3,000 per month pending the divorce proceedings. Granted on all counts. Judge Walsh signed the orders with firm, decisive strokes. Mr. Henley, you are to vacate the marital home by 5 p.m. today. You may collect your personal belongings under police escort. You are not to contact your wife except through attorneys. You are not to make any financial transactions involving marital assets. And I strongly suggest you get yourself a good criminal defense attorney, because what you've done here is not just grounds for divorce. It's grounds for federal prosecution. This hearing is adjourned. The gavel came down with a sharp crack that felt like victory. Outside the courtroom, Rebecca gave me a fierce hug. That went even better than expected. Judge Walsh clearly saw through his nonsense immediately. You can go home, Claire. The police will escort you there to make sure Marcus complies with the order. What about Patricia? She's supposed to arrive today. Rebecca's smile was wicked. Well, that's going to be an interesting surprise for her, isn't it? Showing up to move into a house she has no legal right to. Finding out her son is under federal investigation. I'd almost pay to see her face. 2 police officers met me at the house at 4 p.m. Marcus's car was in the driveway, along with a black Mercedes I didn't recognize. Patricia's rental, probably. They'd beaten me here. The officers knocked firmly on the door. There was a long pause, then Marcus opened it. His face hardened when he saw me behind the officers. Claire, what is this? What have you done? Officer Martinez, the older of the 2 cops, held up the court orders. Mr. Henley, we're here to enforce a court order granting your wife exclusive possession of this property. You need to vacate immediately. This is my house. Marcus's voice rose. She can't just kick me out. Actually, sir, legally speaking, she just did. Officer Martinez remained calm and professional. You have been given until 5 p.m. to collect your personal belongings and leave the premises. If you refuse, we will arrest you for violation of a court order. A woman's voice came from inside the house, sharp and imperious. Marcus, what is going on out there? Who are these people? Patricia appeared behind Marcus, and I saw her for the first time in 8 months. She looked exactly as I remembered. Perfectly coiffed blonde hair, expensive clothing, an expression of automatic disdain that she probably practiced in the mirror. Her eyes landed on me and narrowed. You. What are you doing here? I thought you understood you were no longer welcome in this house. Actually, Mrs. Henley, I said, keeping my voice level. This is my house. And you're trespassing. I beg your pardon? Patricia's voice could have frozen nitrogen. Marcus, tell this woman. Ma'am, Officer Martinez interrupted. This property belongs to Mrs. Claire Henley. She has a court order granting her exclusive possession. Both you and Mr. Henley need to leave immediately. Patricia turned to Marcus, her expression outraged. Marcus, do something. Call our attorney. This is absurd. Mom, Marcus's voice was strained. There's been a complication. The bank called about the refinance. Claire found out about it and she's filed for divorce. She's claiming I forged her signature. The color drained from Patricia's face. You told me that wouldn't be a problem. You said she'd already signed the papers. The silence that followed was deafening. I watched understanding dawn on the officers' faces. Patricia had just admitted knowledge of the fraud. Out loud. In front of witnesses. Ma'am, Officer Martinez said carefully. Are you saying you knew about the refinance application? Patricia seemed to realize her mistake. Her mouth opened and closed. That's not what I meant. I simply meant. Rebecca is going to love this, I said quietly. That's my attorney, by the way. She's very interested in talking to you about your involvement in the mortgage fraud scheme. There was no scheme, Patricia snapped, but her voice had lost its certainty. Marcus was simply trying to access the equity in his property to help me during a difficult time. If there was a misunderstanding about signatures, that's hardly criminal. The FBI might disagree. I kept my tone conversational. They opened an investigation this morning. Mortgage fraud is a federal crime, Patricia. Carries up to 30 years in prison. And if you helped plan it or encouraged it, you could be charged as an accessory. Patricia looked like she'd been slapped. She turned to Marcus. You said this was handled. You promised me this would work. Mom, please. Marcus looked desperate now. Just go back to your hotel. I'll sort this out. But I've already checked out of the hotel. Patricia's voice was rising toward hysteria. The penthouse renovations aren't complete. I was supposed to be staying here. You promised me I could stay here. Plans change, I said flatly. Officer Martinez, can we move this along? I'd like to reclaim my home. The next hour was grimly satisfying. Marcus packed his things under police supervision while Patricia sat in her rental car, making increasingly agitated phone calls. I stood in the doorway of my home, and watched my husband of 6 years carry boxes out to his car like a stranger. He tried to talk to me once. Claire, please. We need to discuss this reasonably. I made a mistake, but we can fix this. You forged my signature to steal $400,000. I kept my voice flat. You kicked me out of my own house for your mother. You destroyed our marriage for money. There's nothing to discuss, Marcus. Talk to your attorney and get yourself a criminal lawyer while you're at it. By 5:30 they were gone. Marcus and Patricia drove away in separate cars, and I stood alone in the house I'd fought to keep. It felt hollow without the life Marcus and I had built together, but it also felt clean. Fresh. Mine. Amy arrived 20 minutes later with champagne and pizza. We're celebrating, she announced, sweeping through the door. You just took down your fraudster husband and his nightmare mother-in-law in a single afternoon. That deserves good alcohol and carbs. We sat on the living room floor like we had in college, eating pizza straight from the box and drinking champagne from coffee mugs because I couldn't find the proper glasses in the chaos. So what happens now? Amy asked. Now. I took a sip of champagne. Now we wait for the FBI investigation to play out. Rebecca says it's very strong. The bank has all the documentation, and Patricia basically confessed in front of police officers that she knew about the fraud. Marcus is looking at serious prison time unless he takes a plea deal. And the divorce? Should be straightforward. With the fraud case, I'll get the house, obviously. Probably a significant portion of any other marital assets. Rebecca thinks we can have it finalized within 6 months. Amy studied me carefully. How are you feeling? Really? I thought about it. Honestly, I feel relieved. Sad but relieved. I spent 2 weeks thinking I was losing everything. My marriage, my home, my sense of who I was. Turns out I was just losing dead weight. That's my girl. Amy clinked her coffee mug against mine. To new beginnings and the downfall of entitled rich people. To new beginnings, I echoed. The next few weeks passed in a flurry of legal proceedings. The FBI investigation moved forward with efficient determination. It turned out that Marcus had been planning the refinance for months, carefully timing it to coincide with Patricia's move. They'd found emails between them discussing how to access the home equity, how to forge my signature, how to get me out of the house quickly enough that I wouldn't have time to interfere. Patricia had researched the refinance process and had been coaching Marcus on how to fill out the applications. They'd practiced forging my signature together, using old documents from the house. The level of premeditation was staggering and made any claim of innocent mistake impossible to maintain. Marcus's criminal attorney advised him to take a plea deal. He pleaded guilty to 1 count of mortgage fraud in exchange for a reduced sentence of 3 years in federal prison and full restitution to the bank. Patricia, as an accessory, was sentenced to 18 months and a substantial fine. The divorce was finalized 4 months after I filed. I got the house, my teacher's pension remained untouched, and I received half of Marcus's retirement account along with the $3,000 monthly support payments until the assets were divided. More importantly, I got my freedom. On the day the divorce was finalized, Rebecca and Amy took me out to dinner at an upscale restaurant downtown. We ordered expensive wine and laughed too loudly, and made inappropriate toasts to failed marriages and federal crimes. You did something remarkable, Rebecca said as we finished dessert. Most people in your situation would have just walked away. Taken the loss. Been too intimidated by the money and the lawyers to fight back. But you fought and you won. I had good help, I said, raising my glass to both of them. Still, Amy added. You could have been vindictive. You could have gone scorched earth. But you just wanted what was rightfully yours and for them to face consequences for what they did. That takes character. I thought about Marcus in federal prison, Patricia in a minimum security facility for white-collar criminals, both of them paying for their greed and arrogance. Part of me felt sorry for them. But mostly, I felt grateful that I discovered who they really were before they'd succeeded in their plan. 6 months after the divorce, I was sitting in my living room. The one I'd repainted a soft yellow that felt warm and hopeful, when my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Is this Claire Donovan? The voice was female, professional. Yes. I'd gone back to my maiden name as soon as the divorce was final. Ms. Donovan, this is Linda Choi from the District Attorney's Office. I'm calling to let you know that the restitution from your ex-husband's case has been processed. You should receive a check for $187,000 within the next week. That represents your half of the fraudulently obtained refinance proceeds, plus interest and penalties. I sat up straight. $187,000. More than enough to pay off my student loans entirely. Enough for a real vacation. Enough to finally breathe. Thank you, I managed. Ms. Donovan, if I may say so, your cooperation with the investigation made this case. Your documentation, your willingness to testify, your clear recollection of events. You helped us build an airtight case. That doesn't always happen. After hanging up, I sat in my sunny yellow living room and cried. But they weren't tears of sadness or loss. They were tears of relief, of vindication, of the profound satisfaction that comes from standing up for yourself and winning. The check arrived a week later. I stared at it for a long time, this piece of paper that represented justice, that represented Marcus and Patricia being held accountable, that represented the equity in my home that they tried to steal. I paid off my student loans first. Every single one of them. $68,000 that had hung over my head since college, gone in a single transaction. Then I set up a retirement account separate from my pension, something that was entirely mine that no one could touch. I donated $10,000 to a local women's shelter that helped victims of financial abuse. And with the rest, I renovated the master bedroom, replacing every piece of furniture, repainting the walls a serene blue, making it completely mine. A year after that terrible afternoon when I'd been packing trash bags and thought my life was ending, I stood in my beautiful bedroom and realized something profound. Marcus and Patricia had tried to take everything from me. My home, my dignity, my financial security, my future. They'd seen me as an obstacle to be removed, a woman too weak or stupid to fight back. They'd been catastrophically wrong. I'd fought back with everything I had. I'd been strategic, relentless, willing to see the fight through no matter how ugly it got. And in the end, I hadn't just survived. I'd won. My phone buzzed with a text from Amy. Dinner tonight? I found an amazing new Thai place. Absolutely, I texted back. My treat. As I got ready for dinner, choosing a dress from my closet in my home that was completely and irrevocably mine, I thought about that phone call from the bank that had changed everything. If James Morrison hadn't been thorough, if the bank's underwriting department hadn't caught the forged signature, Marcus and Patricia might have succeeded. I might have lost everything. But they had caught it. And I'd been brave enough to fight. I looked at myself in the mirror, this woman who'd been dismissed as disposable, who'd been expected to quietly disappear, who'd instead fought back and won. I smiled at my reflection. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is refuse to be a victim. Sometimes the greatest revenge is simply ensuring that justice is served, and then moving forward into the life you deserve. And sometimes the woman everyone underestimates turns out to be the strongest person in the room. I grabbed my keys, locked my door, and headed out into the evening, ready for whatever came next. Thank you very much for listening. Please leave a comment with a rating from 0 to 10. Subscribe to the channel and share this story with a friend. 3 months into my new life, I was standing in the produce section of Whole Foods, debating between organic apples and conventional ones, when I heard a voice I recognized. A voice that still made my stomach clench with instinctive anxiety despite everything that had happened. Patricia Henley was arguing with a store employee about the price of imported cheese, her tone exactly as imperious and demanding as I remembered. She hadn't seen me yet, too focused on berating the poor kid behind the counter about why Swiss Gruyere should be discounted because it had been sitting out for 15 minutes. Some things never changed. I could have walked away. Should have walked away. The restraining order had expired, and legally there was nothing preventing us from being in the same space, but every therapy session I'd had with Dr. Ramona-chan, the counselor Amy had recommended, emphasized the importance of avoiding unnecessary triggers during the healing process. Patricia Henley was definitely an unnecessary trigger. But something kept me rooted to the spot. Curiosity, maybe, or the strange desire to see what had become of the woman who tried to destroy my life. She looked different than I remembered. Older, certainly. The perfect blonde hair had more gray at the roots than she'd ever have allowed before. Her clothing was still expensive, but not quite as meticulously coordinated. There were stress lines around her mouth that makeup couldn't quite hide. Federal prison, even minimum security, apparently left its mark. Patricia finally finished her complaint and turned away from the counter, clutching her cheese with the air of someone who'd won a great victory. That's when she saw me. Recognition flashed across her face, followed immediately by something that looked almost like fear. Good. Claire. Her voice was careful, measured, lacking the automatic contempt it used to carry. I didn't expect to see you here. It's a public grocery store, Patricia. I kept my tone neutral, professional, the same voice I used with difficult parents during conferences. I shop here regularly. Of course. She shifted the cheese to her other hand, and I noticed she wasn't wearing the enormous diamond ring Richard had given her for their 25th anniversary. Sold to pay legal fees, probably. How have you been? The question was so absurd I almost laughed. How had I been? Well, let's see. Your son tried to steal my house and commit federal fraud against me. You helped him do it. You both went to prison. My marriage ended. I spent 6 months in intensive therapy working through trust issues and financial trauma. But sure, let's have a casual catch-up conversation in the cheese aisle. I've been well. I picked up a package of apples, the organic ones, because I could afford them now without guilt. And you? How was your stay in Alderson? Her face tightened. It was exactly as horrible as you'd imagine. 18 months of my life gone. My reputation destroyed. My friends won't return my calls. The club revoked my membership. Everything Richard and I built together just gone. I should have felt satisfaction at her distress. Part of me did. But mostly I just felt tired. You tried to steal $400,000 from me, Patricia. You helped your son forge my signature. You planned to kick me out of my own home. What did you think was going to happen? I thought we'd get away with it. The words came out flat, honest, stripped of the usual pretense. Marcus said you'd just leave quietly. That you wouldn't fight back. That you'd be too intimidated to challenge us. Because I was poor? I asked quietly. Because I came from a family without money or connections. Because you always thought I was beneath you? Patricia looked away, unable or unwilling to answer. The silence stretched between us, filled with the ambient noise of the grocery store. Other shoppers moving around us with their ordinary concerns about dinner and weekly sales. I underestimated you. She finally met my eyes again. That was my mistake. I saw what I wanted to see. A woman who wouldn't fight, who'd just accept her place. I was wrong. Yes, you were. I adjusted my shopping basket. Is there a point to this conversation, Patricia? Because I have other things to do today. Marcus writes to me sometimes. Her voice was quieter now, almost tentative. From prison. He's in a facility in Pennsylvania. He has 2 more years on his sentence. I know where he is. I'd gotten notification of his location as part of the Victim Services program. I also know he's eligible for early release in 18 months if he maintains good behavior. He asks about you in his letters. Whether I've seen you. How you're doing. If you're happy. The audacity of that made me laugh, a short bitter sound. He doesn't get to know how I'm doing. He doesn't get updates on my life. He tried to steal from me, Patricia. He chose his mother's greed over his wife's trust. Whatever he wants to know about me now is irrelevant. Patricia nodded slowly, accepting this. I destroyed my son's life. That's what I've had 18 months to think about. Not just what I did to you, though that was terrible enough. But what I did to Marcus. I pushed him into this. I convinced him it would work. I told him you wouldn't fight back. And now his life is ruined. His career is gone. He'll have a federal felony on his record forever. All because I couldn't accept that he'd married someone I didn't approve of. I could have responded with anger. Could have detailed all the ways their actions had hurt me, traumatized me, forced me to rebuild my entire sense of self and security. But looking at this diminished version of Patricia Henley, this woman who'd lost everything she valued because of her own arrogance and prejudice, I realized I didn't need to. She was already living with the consequences. I hope you've learned something from all this. I shifted my basket again, ready to move on with my shopping and my life. But honestly, Patricia, whether you have or haven't doesn't affect me anymore. You're not part of my life. Marcus isn't part of my life. What you do with whatever time you have left is your own concern. I started to walk away, but her voice stopped me one more time. For what it's worth, Claire, I am sorry. Not just for getting caught, though obviously I regret that. But for what I did to you. You didn't deserve any of it. You were a good wife to my son, better than he deserved, and I couldn't see that through my own snobbery and stupidity. I turned back to look at her. Patricia Henley apologizing, admitting fault, taking responsibility. If someone had told me a year ago this would happen, I'd have laughed in their face. Thank you for saying that. I meant it, somewhat to my own surprise. I hope you figure out what comes next for you, Patricia. I really do. But I need you to understand that your apology doesn't change anything for me. It doesn't undo the damage. It doesn't erase what happened. It's just words. I know. She looked older than her 67 years, worn down by consequences she'd never anticipated facing. I just needed to say them anyway. For my own conscience, if nothing else. We stood there for another moment, this woman who tried to destroy me and the life I'd rebuilt from the wreckage. Then I nodded once, turned and walked away. I didn't look back. At the checkout counter, my hands were shaking slightly as I loaded groceries onto the belt. The encounter had rattled me more than I wanted to admit. I texted Dr. Chun immediately, asking if she had any openings this week. She responded within minutes that she could see me Thursday afternoon. Amy called as I was loading groceries into my car. Her timing was impeccable as always. She had a sixth sense for when I needed to talk. I just ran into Patricia at Whole Foods. The words tumbled out as soon as I answered. Oh my God. Are you okay? Do you need me to come over? I'm fine. Shaken but fine. She apologized, actually. Said she was sorry for what she did. Amy was silent for a long moment. Do you believe her? I think I do, actually. Which is weird. She looked defeated, Amy. Broken. Nothing like the woman who used to look at me like I was dirt on her shoe. Good. Amy's voice was fierce. She should be broken. She should feel exactly as terrible as she made you feel. An apology doesn't fix what she did. I know. I started the car, letting the air conditioning wash over me. But it was still strange to hear. I never thought Patricia Henley would apologize to me for anything, let alone take responsibility for destroying her own son's life. People change when they face real consequences. Amy's tone softened. Or at least some people do. The question is, how do you feel about it? Honestly, I'm not sure. It doesn't change anything. I'm not suddenly going to forgive her or want a relationship with her. But I guess it's confirmation that what I did was right. That standing up for myself had an impact beyond just protecting my own interests. You protected yourself and held criminals accountable. Amy reminded me. That's not just right, Claire. That's powerful. That's exactly what you should have done. We talked for another 20 minutes while I drove home, Amy keeping me grounded with her practical wisdom and unconditional support. By the time I pulled into my driveway, the shaking had stopped and I felt more centered. My house looked beautiful in the afternoon light. I'd spent the last 3 months making it truly mine room by room. The living room had new furniture, comfortable and colorful instead of the bland beige Marcus had insisted on. The kitchen had new curtains I'd made myself, a cheerful yellow fabric with tiny blue flowers. The bedroom was my sanctuary now, decorated in calming blues and greens with artwork from local artists I'd discovered at weekend markets. This was my space, my home. No one could take it from me again. Inside, I unpacked groceries and made myself a proper lunch, not the sad desk salads I used to eat while grading papers. Grilled chicken, fresh vegetables, crusty bread from the bakery section. I ate slowly, mindfully, another thing Dr. Chun had been helping me work on. Being present in my own life instead of constantly bracing for the next disaster. My phone buzzed with an email notification. The school district's summer program coordinator, asking if I'd be interested in teaching an advanced art intensive for gifted students in July. It would mean extra income and the chance to work with kids who were passionate about art, not just taking my class as an easy elective. I replied immediately that I was interested. Life was rebuilding itself in unexpected ways. The divorce settlement had given me financial stability I'd never had before. The therapy was helping me process the trauma and betrayal. My friendships had deepened, particularly with Amy, who'd proven herself to be the kind of friend who showed up not just for fun times but for the hardest moments. But there were still difficult days. Days when I'd wake up and momentarily forget that Marcus was gone, that my marriage had ended, that I'd spent months fighting a legal battle that should never have been necessary. Days when I'd see couples grocery shopping together or laughing at restaurants and feel a sharp pang of loss for what I'd thought I had. Dr. Chun said this was normal, that healing wasn't linear, that grief could coexist with relief, that I could be glad my marriage ended while still mourning the loss of what I believed it was. She was helping me understand that Marcus and Patricia hadn't just tried to steal my house. They'd stolen my sense of safety, my ability to trust, my belief that the people closest to me had my best interests at heart. Getting those things back was harder than reclaiming the house had been. Thursday's therapy session was intense. I told Dr. Chun about the encounter with Patricia, about the apology, about my mixed feelings regarding the whole interaction. It's interesting that you feel conflicted. Dr. Chun made a note on her tablet. What do you think that conflict represents? I think part of me wanted her to stay a villain. I leaned back in the comfortable chair, looking out the window of her office at the tree-lined street below. It was easier when she was just this terrible person who tried to destroy me. Now she's a broken old woman who lost everything because of her own bad choices, and that's more complicated. Why is that more complicated? Because now I have to acknowledge that she's human, that she's suffering. And part of me, the part that was raised to be kind and compassionate, feels like I should care about that. But another part of me, the part that had to fight for my own survival, thinks she deserves every bit of suffering she's experiencing. Dr. Chun nodded thoughtfully. Both of those responses are valid, Claire. You can acknowledge Patricia's humanity and her consequences without taking responsibility for her well-being. Her suffering is not your concern. You didn't cause it. She caused it through her own choices. I know that intellectually, but emotionally it feels messy. Emotions usually are messy. That's what makes them emotions rather than logic problems. She leaned forward slightly. Here's what I want you to consider. Does Patricia's apology or her current situation change anything about what happened to you? No. The answer was immediate and certain. It doesn't undo the trauma. It doesn't erase the months of fear and fighting. It doesn't give me back the marriage I thought I had. Exactly. So while you can acknowledge her remorse, you don't have to let it affect your own healing process. Her journey is separate from yours now. That helped putting it that way. Patricia's redemption arc, if she was even having one, wasn't my responsibility. My responsibility was to continue building the life I wanted, the life I deserved, the life I'd fought so hard to reclaim. After therapy, I stopped by the art supply store downtown. The summer intensive would require materials, and I wanted to be prepared. While browsing through canvas sizes and paint sets, I ran into another familiar face. This one thankfully was welcome. Claire Donovan, is that really you? I turned to see Michael Torres, a fellow teacher from my school who taught English in the classroom next to mine. We'd been friendly colleagues for years, sharing lesson planning ideas and commiserating about difficult students, but we'd never spent time together outside of school functions. Michael, hi. I smiled genuinely, glad to see a friendly face. Shopping for summer projects? Something like that. He held up a sketchbook and set of charcoal pencils. I'm trying to get back into drawing. Used to do it all the time in college, but teaching kind of ate up all my creative energy. I know that feeling. I gestured to my basket full of supplies. I'm teaching a summer intensive, actually. Gifted students advanced techniques. Should be interesting. That's great. He hesitated, then continued. I heard about what happened with your divorce. I'm really sorry, Claire. That must have been incredibly difficult. Word had gotten around the school, of course. Not all the details, thankfully, but enough that people knew my marriage had ended badly and there had been legal complications. Most of my colleagues had been supportive, sending kind messages or leaving coffee on my desk with encouraging notes. A few had been awkwardly distant, unsure how to interact with me now that I was a divorced woman with a scandalous story. It was difficult. I kept my tone light. But I'm doing much better now. Therapy helps. So does having my own space again. I'm glad to hear that. Michael shifted his sketchbook to his other hand. Actually, and feel free to say no if this is too forward, but a group of us are getting together this Saturday for an art walk downtown. Local galleries, street artists, that kind of thing. Would you want to join us? No pressure, just thought you might enjoy it. I considered the invitation. Part of me wanted to decline, to retreat to the safety of my home and my established routine. But Dr. Chun had been encouraging me to rebuild my social life, to try new things, to remember that not everyone would betray me the way Marcus and Patricia had. That sounds really nice, actually. I'd love to join you. Michael's smile was warm and genuine. Great. We're meeting at Common Grounds coffee shop at 2. Should be a fun afternoon. Walking out of the art supply store, I felt lighter than I had in months. A social invitation. A colleague who'd reached out with kindness. Small things, maybe, but they represented a life that was expanding again instead of contracting around trauma and loss. Saturday arrived with perfect weather. Sunny but not too hot. Ideal for walking around downtown looking at art. I dressed carefully, wanting to look nice without seeming like I was trying too hard. Jeans, a flowing blue top, comfortable sandals. Casual but put together. The group turned out to be 5 people including Michael. There was Jessica from the math department, her husband Tom, Michael's sister Rosa who was visiting from Chicago, and David, a history teacher I'd met a few times at faculty meetings. Everyone was friendly and welcoming, treating me like a normal person rather than the tragic divorcee with a dramatic story. We spent the afternoon wandering from gallery to gallery, admiring local artists' work and debating the merits of various styles and techniques. I found myself laughing more than I had in ages, drawn into heated but good-natured arguments about whether abstract expressionism was brilliant or pretentious, whether sculpture could ever match painting for emotional impact, whether AI-generated art counted as real art. At one gallery, I stopped in front of a painting that made my breath catch. It showed a woman standing in an empty room, her back to the viewer, looking out a window at a vibrant garden beyond. Something about the posture of the figure, the contrast between the stark room and the lush garden, the sense of someone on the threshold between confinement and freedom, resonated deeply. That's powerful. Michael had come to stand beside me, studying the painting. She looks like she's about to step through that window into a completely different life. Yeah, I couldn't take my eyes off it. That's exactly what it looks like. Is that how you feel? His question was gentle, not prying. Like you've stepped through a window into something new? I thought about it, really considered the question. Sometimes. Other times I feel like I'm still standing in the empty room, looking at the garden but not quite sure how to reach it. That's honest. Michael nodded. For what it's worth, from the outside, you seem like someone who's already in the garden. You're one of the strongest people I know, Claire. The compliment caught me off guard. We'd been colleagues for years, but always at a professional distance. I'd never considered that he might have opinions about my character or strength. Thank you. I managed to keep my voice steady despite the unexpected emotion. That means a lot. We moved on to the next gallery, but I kept thinking about the painting, about windows and gardens and transitions, about being someone who was strong even when I didn't feel strong, about rebuilding a life that was mine alone. At the end of the art walk, the group stopped at a wine bar for drinks and appetizers. The conversation flowed easily, topics ranging from school gossip to politics to everyone's summer plans. I found myself genuinely enjoying the company, not constantly monitoring my words or worrying about judgment. At one point, Jessica leaned across the table toward me. Claire, I just want to say you've handled everything with such grace. I don't think I could have been as composed if I'd gone through what you did. I appreciated the sentiment, but it made me uncomfortable. I wasn't graceful. I was a mess for months. I'm still a mess some days. That's what grace looks like in real life. Jessica's smile was knowing. It's not about being perfect. It's about surviving and moving forward, even when everything's falling apart. You did that. You're still doing that. That's impressive. The conversation moved on, but Jessica's words stayed with me. Maybe I had been graceful in my own messy, imperfect way. Maybe grace wasn't about never falling apart, but about putting yourself back together afterward. Michael walked me to my car when the evening ended. The street was quiet, lit by old-fashioned lampposts that gave everything a warm glow. I had a really good time today. I unlocked my car but didn't immediately get in. Thank you for inviting me. I'm glad you came. He leaned against the car next to mine, relaxed and comfortable. You should know, Claire, you don't have to be the strong teacher or the brave divorcee or anything else around us. You can just be yourself, whatever that looks like on any given day. The kindness in his words made my throat tight. How did you get to be so perceptive? English teacher. He grinned. We're professionally trained in reading between the lines and understanding character development. I laughed, the tension breaking. Well, thank you for that. I mean it. This was exactly what I needed today. We should do it again sometime. Not necessarily with the whole group if you'd prefer. Maybe just coffee or lunch. As friends, obviously. No pressure. I studied his face in the lamplight. Michael Torres was attractive in an understated way. Kind eyes, easy smile, the sort of person who made you feel heard when you talked to him. Under different circumstances, maybe I would have been interested in more than friendship. But right now, friendship was exactly what I needed. I'd like that. Coffee sounds perfect. Driving home, I felt something unfamiliar. Contentment, maybe. Or at least the beginning of it. My life was still a work in progress. I was still healing from betrayal and trauma. But I was also building something new. Friendships, social connections, a sense of self that existed independent of marriage or anyone else's approval. The house was dark when I pulled into the driveway, but it didn't feel empty anymore. It felt peaceful. Mine. I turned it into a sanctuary, a place where I felt safe and comfortable and myself. Inside, I made tea and curled up on the couch with a book I'd been meaning to read. Through the window, I could see the small garden I planted in the backyard last month. Tomatoes, herbs, flowers that attracted butterflies. It was thriving in the summer heat, growing wild and beautiful. Like me, I thought. Growing despite everything that had tried to uproot me. My phone buzzed with a text from Amy. How was the art walk? Did you have fun? Did Michael ask you out? I typed back quickly. Had a great time. Michael asked me to coffee as friends. Which is perfect because friends is all I want right now. Her response was immediate. Proud of you. Want to come over tomorrow? I'm making that pasta thing you love. Absolutely. I'll bring wine. Another text came through, this one from Michael. Thanks again for coming today. Really enjoyed your company. Let me know when you're free for that coffee. I smiled at the screen, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with attraction and everything to do with being seen and valued as a person. Will do. Thanks for including me. Setting the phone aside, I returned to my book and my tea, content in the quiet evening. This was my life now. Simple, peaceful mine. No drama, no betrayal, no one trying to take what belonged to me. The next few weeks fell into a comfortable rhythm. I started the summer intensive with a group of 15 talented high school students who were genuinely passionate about art. Teaching them was energizing in a way regular classes sometimes weren't. These kids wanted to be there. They asked challenging questions, pushed boundaries, took creative risks. I found myself staying after class to talk with them about technique and inspiration, and what it meant to be an artist. Michael and I had coffee twice, easy conversations that ranged from work stories to books we were reading to our families and backgrounds. He told me about growing up in a large Mexican-American family in Texas, about teaching English because he'd had a teacher who changed his life by introducing him to Chicano literature. I told him about my modest upbringing, about putting myself through college, about how teaching art felt like giving kids permission to express themselves in ways they might not otherwise have. What I didn't tell him, not yet, was the full story of my divorce. He knew the basics but not the details about the fraud or the prison sentences or the confrontation at the grocery store. That felt too heavy for these light, friendly coffees where we were just two colleagues getting to know each other better. Amy, however, got all the details. She always did. We had weekly dinners now, alternating between her place and mine, where we'd cook together and talk about everything happening in our lives. So Michael. Amy handed me a glass of wine while I chopped vegetables for a salad. Are we still in the friend zone or is something shifting there? Still firmly in the friend zone. I kept my eyes on the cutting board. And that's good, Amy. I'm not ready for anything else. I'm not pushing. She raised her hands in mock surrender. Just checking in. But for the record, when you are ready, Michael seems like a genuinely good guy. He does. I moved the chopped vegetables into the salad bowl. Which is exactly why I don't want to rush into anything. I need to be sure I'm choosing someone for the right reasons, not just because I'm lonely or want to prove I can trust again. That's very mature and self-aware. Amy started plating pasta. Therapy is really working for you. It is. I've learned so much about myself these past few months. About patterns I fell into with Marcus, about warning signs I ignored, about ways I made myself smaller to accommodate his mother's disapproval. I don't want to repeat any of that. You won't. Amy's confidence in me was absolute. You're not the same person you were a year ago, Claire. You're stronger now. More aware. You'll recognize red flags faster. I hope so. I took a sip of wine. Sometimes I worry that I'm too damaged now. That what Marcus and Patricia did broke something fundamental in my ability to trust. You're not broken. You're cautious. There's a difference. Amy brought the plates to her small dining table. Broken means you can't function. Cautious means you're protecting yourself while you heal. That's smart, not damaged. We ate and talked and laughed. And I was grateful again for having a friend like Amy, someone who'd stood by me through the worst of everything, who knew all my flaws and fears and loved me anyway. As summer progressed, I started feeling more like myself than I had in years. Not the self I'd been before Marcus, but a new self. Someone who'd been tested and had emerged with a clearer understanding of her own worth and boundaries. Someone who wouldn't accept less than she deserved ever again. The summer intensive ended with a student art show that filled me with pride. These kids had created amazing work. Pieces that showed technical skill but also emotional depth and creative vision. Parents came to the opening, along with other teachers and administrators. The students glowed with the recognition, and I felt honored to have been part of their artistic development. Michael came to the show, bringing his sister Rosa, who was still visiting from Chicago. They walked through the gallery, genuinely admiring the work, asking thoughtful questions about techniques and inspiration. "You're a really good teacher," Rosa told me, studying a particularly striking abstract painting one of my students had created. "You can tell these kids trust you enough to take risks with their art. That's the goal." I watched my students explaining their work to visitors, confident and articulate. I want them to feel safe exploring their creativity without fear of judgment. That's a gift. Rosa smiled warmly. My art teacher in high school was so rigid and critical that I stopped making art entirely. Took me until my 30s to pick it up again. Teachers like you matter. The compliment settled somewhere deep. Another piece of confirmation that my life had value and meaning beyond my failed marriage. I was good at what I did. I made a difference in young people's lives. That mattered. After the show, Michael asked if I wanted to grab dinner. "Just a casual thing," he said quickly, reading my hesitation. "To celebrate the successful show. No pressure." I agreed because I was hungry and didn't feel like cooking, and his company was easy and comfortable. We ended up at a small Italian place downtown, sitting outside on the patio as the sun set and the evening cooled. The conversation flowed naturally, as it always did with Michael. We talked about the show, about the students, about our plans for the rest of the summer. Then, inevitably, the conversation turned more personal. "Can I ask you something?" Michael set down his fork, his expression serious but not uncomfortable. "You don't have to answer if you don't want to." "Sure." I braced myself, unsure what was coming. "How much did your ex-husband's actions change your view of people in general? Do you find it harder to trust now?" The question was direct but not intrusive, asked with genuine curiosity rather than pity or voyeurism. I appreciated that. Honestly, yes and no. I considered my words carefully. I'm definitely more cautious. I pay closer attention to inconsistencies, to warning signs, to the gap between what people say and what they do. But I don't think I've become cynical. I still believe most people are fundamentally good. Marcus and Patricia were the exception, not the rule. That's a healthy perspective. Michael nodded. It would be easy to let what they did poison your view of everyone. It would. And some days it's tempting. But then I think about people like Amy, who dropped everything to support me. Or the nurse at the bank who could have just processed the paperwork, but instead took the time to call me. Or my attorney who fought for me like I was family. There are good people everywhere, Michael. I just have to be smart about recognizing which is which. You're remarkably well adjusted for someone who went through what you did. His tone was admiring. I laughed at that. I'm really not. I'm in therapy every week. I have panic attacks sometimes over financial decisions. I check my credit report obsessively. I'm working through a lot of trust issues and trauma. I'm just also determined not to let what happened to me define the rest of my life. Michael was quiet for a moment, then reached across the table and briefly squeezed my hand. That's what makes you strong, Claire. Not that you're not struggling, but that you're struggling and still moving forward. The touch was brief, friendly, but it sent an unexpected flutter through my stomach. Not attraction exactly, or not just attraction, but something more complicated. The recognition that I might someday be ready for more than friendship. Not today, maybe not for months yet, but someday. We finished dinner and walked back to our cars in companionable silence. The street was busy with Saturday night activity, couples and groups of friends enjoying the warm evening. Thank you for tonight. I unlocked my car. I had a really good time. Me too. Michael leaned against his car, parked next to mine. Claire, I want you to know I'm in no rush here. Whatever this is, friendship or maybe something more eventually, it can develop at whatever pace you need. No pressure, no expectations. Just genuine appreciation for your company. The honesty and patience in his words made my chest tight. Thank you for saying that. And for meaning it. I can tell you mean it. I do. He smiled. Now go home and get some rest. You've earned it after pulling off that amazing student show. Driving home, I thought about the evening. About Michael's kindness and patience. About the fact that I'd enjoyed his company without anxiety or second-guessing. About the possibility that maybe, eventually, I could open myself up to someone new without the weight of past betrayal crushing that possibility before it had a chance to grow. But not yet. I wasn't ready yet. And that was okay. There was no timeline for healing. No schedule that dictated when I should be over the trauma and ready to trust again. I could take all the time I needed. At home, I changed into comfortable clothes and made tea, settling into my evening routine. But before I could completely relax, my phone rang. Unknown number again. My heart rate spiked immediately, conditioned by too many stressful phone calls over the past year. Hello? My voice was cautious. Ms. Donovan? This is Agent Sarah Mitchell from the FBI. I'm calling regarding the fraud case against Marcus Henley and Patricia Henley. Do you have a few minutes to talk? My mouth went dry. Yes, of course. Is something wrong? Not at all. Agent Mitchell's voice was professional but warm. I'm actually calling with good news. The restitution payments have been processed faster than anticipated. You should receive the full amount within the next 2 weeks, rather than the 3 months we originally projected. Oh, I sat down heavily on the couch. That's wonderful. Thank you. Additionally, I wanted to inform you that both defendants have been model prisoners. Marcus Henley has been participating in financial literacy and ethics programs. Patricia Henley has been mentoring other inmates in job readiness skills. While this doesn't excuse their crimes, I thought you might want to know they seem to be taking their rehabilitation seriously. I didn't know what to say to that. Part of me didn't care what Marcus and Patricia were doing in prison. But another part, the part that had seen Patricia broken and apologetic in the grocery store, felt something like cautious hope that they might actually learn from their mistakes. Thank you for letting me know. I finally managed. One more thing, Ms. Donovan. Agent Mitchell continued. I've worked on a lot of fraud cases over my career. Your cooperation and thoroughness in documenting everything made this one of the strongest cases I've ever built. Your courage in fighting back and your attention to detail were instrumental in getting justice. I wanted to make sure you knew that. After hanging up, I sat in the quiet living room, processing the conversation. Model prisoners. Rehabilitation. The full restitution coming soon. It was all good news, objectively speaking. But it also felt surreal, like a chapter of my life finally closing. I called Dr. Chun, leaving a message that I'd like to schedule an extra session this week. This felt like something I needed to process with professional help, not just through my own rumination. She called back the next morning, Sunday, and we scheduled a session for Tuesday afternoon. In the meantime, I tried to stay present, to not spiral into overthinking about what Marcus and Patricia's rehabilitation meant, or whether I should care or how I was supposed to feel about any of it. Amy came over Sunday afternoon with ice cream and a determination to distract me. We watched terrible reality TV and made snarky comments and didn't talk about Marcus or Patricia or the FBI or anything serious. It was exactly what I needed. By Tuesday, I'd processed enough to have a coherent conversation with Dr. Chun about it all. We talked about closure, about what it meant that Marcus and Patricia might actually be changing, about whether I needed their redemption for my own healing. You don't need their redemption for your healing. Dr. Chen's words were firm, grounding. Their journey is separate from yours. Whether they become better people or not doesn't change what you've already accomplished. She was right. I'd already won. I had my house, my independence, my self-respect. I'd fought back against people who'd underestimated me and emerged stronger. What Marcus and Patricia did with their remaining prison time was irrelevant to my continued growth. 3 weeks later, I received the restitution check. The full amount, just as Agent Mitchell had promised. I stared at it for a long time, this piece of paper representing justice, accountability, the tangible proof that I'd been right to fight. I deposited it immediately, then made decisions that felt empowering rather than fearful. Half went into a retirement account that only I controlled. A quarter went into an emergency fund that would ensure I'd never be financially vulnerable again. The rest I used to renovate my art studio space in the spare bedroom, creating a sanctuary where I could paint and create without constraint. Michael and I continued our easy friendship through the fall. Coffee dates became regular, comfortable spaces where I could be myself without performance or pretense. He never pushed for more, never made me feel pressured or obligated. Just steady, patient friendship that slowly rebuilt my capacity to trust. By winter, something had shifted. I woke up one morning and realized I'd gone 3 entire days without thinking about Marcus or the divorce or what had happened. 3 days where I'd simply lived my life, teaching and creating and spending time with people I cared about, without the weight of past trauma pressing down on every moment. That's when I knew I was healing. Not healed, maybe never fully healed, but healing in ways that mattered. When Michael asked me to dinner in December, something beyond friendship, I surprised myself by saying yes. Not because I needed to prove I could trust again, but because I wanted to. Because he'd earned that trust through months of consistent kindness and respect. The dinner was lovely. Easy conversation, genuine laughter, the comfortable intimacy of 2 people who already knew each other well, choosing to explore something deeper. When he walked me to my door afterward, he kissed me gently, asking permission first, respecting my boundaries even in that moment. Felt like possibility, like hope. Like the beginning of something new built on a foundation of genuine respect, rather than assumptions or obligations. Standing in my doorway after he left, I looked at the home I'd fought so hard to keep, the life I'd rebuilt from wreckage, the woman I'd become through surviving betrayal and choosing courage over victimhood. They'd tried to throw me out, to make me disposable, to steal everything I'd worked for. Instead, they'd lost everything while I'd gained something far more valuable than money or property. I'd gained myself, stronger, wiser, unshakable in my worth. And that was something no one could ever take from me again. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.